My hands trembled as I adjusted the rearview mirror for the third time, checking my lipstick one more last time. Coral Dream, the saleslady had called it. Perfect for your skin tone, ma'am. It wondered if 64 was too old for coral anything, but here I was, wearing it to meet a stranger my daughter had insisted would be perfect for me. The restaurant looked exactly like the kind of place Helen would choose, upscale enough to feel special, casual enough that I wouldn't feel overdressed in my navy blazer. Through the large windows, I could see couples at candlelit tables, their conversations animated by wine and possibility. My stomach clenched. When was the last time I'd sat across from a man who wasn't my doctor or the pharmacy clerk asking if I needed help carrying my prescriptions to the car? I pulled down the visor one more time. The face looking back at me still surprised me sometimes. When did my mother's eyes replace mine? When did these lines around my mouth deepen into permanent grooves? Tom used to say I had the most expressive face he'd ever seen. Every emotion plays across it like a movie, he'd whisper, tracing the corner of my smile with his finger. But Tom had been gone for 3 years now, and I was here, about to have dinner with someone named Robert, who supposedly loved hiking and classical music and had kind eyes, according to his profile. The parking lot was fuller than I'd expected for a Wednesday evening. I sat in my car for another minute, watching other diners walk through the front door with the easy confidence of people who belonged somewhere. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should text Helen and tell her I was sick. Maybe I should drive home and heat up the leftover casserole and watch my programs and pretend this entire evening never happened. But then I remembered the look in Helen's eyes last Sunday when she'd suggested this. The way she'd paused while loading my dishwasher, her hands still on a plate, before turning to me with that expression that meant she'd been thinking about something for a while. Mom, you know Dad wouldn't want you to be alone forever, right? The words had hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. I gathered my purse, checked to make sure I had my phone, and stepped out into the cool October evening. The hostess was younger than my granddaughter, with the kind of effortless beauty that made me remember what it felt like to turn heads when I walked into a room. She smiled at me with professional warmth. "Table for 2? Are you meeting someone?" "Yes, Robert Matthews. I'm a bit early." "Of course, right this way. He's actually already here." My heart started beating faster as I followed her through the dining room. Already here? That was either very good or potentially awkward. Tom had always been exactly on time, never early, never late. It had driven me crazy when we were young, but later I'd found it comforting, knowing exactly when to expect him. The hostess stopped at a corner table where a man sat with his back partially to me, reading something on his phone. Silver hair, nicely cut, broad shoulders in a dark sweater. He looked up as we approached, and I felt my breath catch somewhere between my throat and my chest. Those weren't kind eyes. They were familiar eyes. They were David's eyes. 47 years dissolved like sugar in rain. I was 17 again, standing in the hallway of Riverside High, watching David Morrison walk toward his locker like he owned the world. The boy who'd taken me to junior prom, who'd promised we'd be together forever, who disappeared from my life the summer before senior year without so much as a phone call. He stood up, extending his hand with the polite smile of a man meeting a stranger. "You must be Eleanor. I'm Robert. Well, actually, most people call me Bob now." Robert? Bob? Not David. But it was David, wasn't it? The same strong jawline, now softened with age. The same way of holding his head slightly tilted when he was unsure about something. The same small scar above his left eyebrow from when he'd fallen off his bike trying to impress me. I took his hand, and the touch sent a jolt of recognition through me that I hoped didn't show on my face. His skin was rougher now, marked by decades I knew nothing about, but his grip was still firm and warm. "Eleanor, yes, but please call me Ellie. The lie came so easily, I almost believed it myself. I'd been Eleanor to everyone for 45 years. Eleanor to Tom, Eleanor to the children, Eleanor on tax returns and medical forms and grocery store loyalty cards. But I'd been Ellie to David back when the future stretched ahead of us like an endless summer afternoon. We sat down, and I watched him as he settled into his chair, unfolding his napkin with the same careful precision I remembered. He didn't recognize me. How was that possible? Had I changed so much? Or maybe he was pretending not to recognize me, the way I was pretending not to recognize him. Maybe this whole evening was some elaborate setup, some cruel joke the universe was playing on both of us. "This is a lovely place," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Do you come here often?" "Actually, no. My daughter recommended it. She said it had romantic ambiance, whatever that means." He laughed, and the sound hit me like a physical thing. It was deeper now, rougher around the edges, but unmistakably his. I'm still figuring out this whole dating thing. It's been a few years. "For me, too." I studied his face while he looked at his menu. The lines around his eyes were deeper, and there was a softness to his features that hadn't been there when he was 18 and invincible. But when he concentrated on reading, he still got that little furrow between his eyebrows, just like he used to when he was trying to solve a problem in calculus class. The waitress appeared beside our table, another young woman who probably thought we were cute in that patronizing way young people view older couples. "Can I start you folks off with something to drink?" "I'll have a glass of red wine, David," Bob said. "The Cabernet, I think." I felt myself smile despite everything. "Actually, I'll have the same. Though I have to warn you, I used to hate red wine, could barely stomach it." He looked up from his menu with a curious expression. "Really? What changed your mind?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibilities. I could tell him the truth, that I'd learned to love red wine because Tom had loved it, because on our second date he'd ordered a bottle of Merlot and spent 20 minutes explaining the difference between tannins and acidity while I pretended to care. I could tell him how I'd gradually acquired the taste, how it had become associated with candlelit dinners and anniversary celebrations and quiet evenings when the children were finally asleep. Or I could tell him the other truth, that I'd hated red wine at 17 because the only time I tried it was at Sarah Henderson's graduation party, where I'd been so nervous about seeing him with Jennifer Kowalski that I'd downed half a glass on an empty stomach and spent the rest of the night throwing up in Sarah's mother's prized rose bushes. "People change, I suppose," I said instead. "Tastes evolve." The waitress left with our order, and we were alone again with the weight of decades between us. He was looking at me now with the kind of attention that made me hyper-aware of every line on my face, every gray hair I hadn't managed to cover completely. Did he suspect? Was there some flicker of recognition he was trying to place? "So, Eleanor, Ellie," he said, testing the name like he was trying to decide if it fit. "Tell me about yourself. Helen mentioned you were a teacher?" Helen? My daughter Helen, who had somehow arranged for me to have dinner with the boy who'd broken my heart when Eisenhower was president. The coincidence was too enormous to be accidental, but Helen had never shown any interest in my high school stories. Had I mentioned David's name? Had I said more than I remembered during one of those wine-soaked evenings when she'd visit and we'd end up looking through old photo albums? Retired now, but yes, third grade for 35 years. I watched his face carefully. Did he remember that I'd always wanted to teach? That we'd talked about it during those long summer afternoons when we'd lie on the grass behind the old mill, planning futures we were sure we'd share? What about you? Engineering. Started my own consulting firm about 20 years ago, but I sold it when my wife got sick. The words came out carefully, like he'd practiced saying them. She passed 4 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. And I was. Whatever had happened between us, Whatever reason he'd had for disappearing from my life, I wouldn't wish that kind of loss on anyone. I'd watched Tom fade away one day at a time, watched cancer steal pieces of him until there wasn't enough left to hold on to. It's hard, losing someone you've loved that long. 41 years, he said quietly. We met in college. She was wonderful, patient with my awkwardness, smarter than me about everything that mattered. He looked up at me with something that might have been vulnerability. I never expected to be doing this. Dating, I mean. Meeting new people. Starting over at 70. 70. So he was a year older than me, just like he'd always been. I did the math quickly. If he'd met his wife in college, that would have been just a few years after high school. Just a few years after he'd vanished from my world without explanation. Had he loved her the way he'd claimed to love me? Had he promised her forever and actually meant it? Our wine arrived, deep and dark in glasses that caught the candlelight. He raised his glass toward mine. To new beginnings, he said, and something in his voice made me think he might need this as much as I did. To new beginnings, I agreed, and our glasses touched with a sound like a small bell. The wine was rich and complex, nothing like the harsh bite I remembered from high school parties. Everything was different now, our faces, our voices, our lives, but sitting across from him, watching him taste his wine with the same careful attention he'd once given to everything, felt like stepping back into a song I'd thought I'd forgotten. We ordered dinner, salmon for me, steak for him, just like always. He still ate his salad first, still cut his meat into precise small pieces. Some things didn't change, apparently. Some habits ran so deep, they survived decades and marriages, and whatever transformations had turned David Morrison into Robert Matthews. Do you have children? I asked, though I already knew the answer would hurt. He'd had the life I'd imagined we would have together, just with someone else. 3, 2 daughters and a son, all grown now, scattered across the country doing their own things. Sarah, she's the one who insisted I try this whole online dating thing. She said her mother wouldn't want me to be alone. He smiled, but there was sadness in it. What about you? 2, Helen and Michael. Helen's the one who, well, she's the reason I'm here too. She worries about me rattling around in that big house by myself. I took another sip of wine, feeling it warm me from the inside. Michael lives in Seattle, so I don't see him as much as I'd like. But Helen's close by, always checking on me, making sure I'm eating properly and paying my bills on time. Are you? Eating properly, I mean? There was something teasing in his voice, and for a moment I could almost see the boy he'd been, the one who used to make me laugh until my sides ached. Most days, though I have to admit, cooking for one is harder than I expected. I find myself making enough food for 4 people and then eating leftovers for a week. I felt myself relaxing slightly, falling into the rhythm of conversation. This was easier than I'd expected. Talking to this version of David who didn't know he was David, who couldn't hurt me the way 18-year-old David had. The food arrived, and we ate in companionable silence for a while. I watched him cut his steak with the same methodical precision I remembered, watched him taste everything before adding salt or pepper. Some muscle memory made me want to reach across the table and brush a crumb from the corner of his mouth the way I used to during lunch at school. This is good, he said, gesturing at his plate. I haven't had a meal I didn't cook myself in months. It's nice to have someone to eat with. The admission was so honest, it made my chest tight. I know what you mean. I talk to the television more than I care to admit. He laughed, and the sound filled something hollow inside me that I hadn't realized was empty. At least you talk to the TV. I argue with it. The news anchors probably think I'm losing my mind. Are you? Losing your mind, I mean? The question came out more seriously than I'd intended. He considered it while he chewed, that same thoughtful expression I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Some days I feel like I'm just going through the motions, you know? Get up, make coffee, read the paper, work in the garden, watch the news, go to bed, repeat. It's like I'm waiting for something, but I don't know what. I knew exactly what he meant, the waiting, the feeling that life was happening somewhere else, to other people, while you stood still and watched. Maybe that's what this is, I said carefully, the something you were waiting for. He looked at me with those familiar eyes, and for a moment I thought I saw recognition flicker across his features. But then it was gone, replaced by the polite smile of a man on a first date with a woman whose name he'd learned an hour ago. Maybe, he said, though I have to admit, when Sarah showed me your profile, I almost backed out. You seemed too good to be true. Beautiful, intelligent, interesting. I figured you'd take one look at me and run. Beautiful. When was the last time anyone had called me beautiful? Tom had, even at the end when I was exhausted and scared and felt anything but beautiful. But this was different. This was David, Robert, whatever his name was now, looking at me with appreciation and something that might have been desire, not recognizing the girl he'd once promised to love forever. "I'm glad you didn't back out," I said, and meant it. Whatever this evening was turning into, it was better than another night alone with my television and my memories. We talked through the rest of dinner about books we'd read, places we'd traveled, grandchildren we adored from a distance. He told me about his wife's garden, how he still couldn't bring himself to change anything she'd planted. I told him about Tom's woodworking shop in the garage, how I'd finally donated his tools to the high school, but kept the rocking chair he'd made for Helen when she was born. The conversation flowed easier than I'd expected, like we were old friends catching up, rather than strangers feeling each other out. But underneath it all, I was hyper-aware of every gesture, every expression, every word choice that might betray the truth. Did he really not remember me, or was he playing the same game I was, pretending this was our first meeting? As the evening wore on, I found myself studying his hands while he talked. They were older now, marked with age spots and a thin wedding ring tan line that hadn't quite faded. But they were still his hands. Long fingers, strong palms, a small scar on his knuckle from the time he tried to fix his motorcycle without proper tools. Those hands had held mine during movies, had traced letters on my back while I tried to guess what he was spelling, had fumbled with my bra strap in the back seat of his father's Buick while we both pretended to know what we were doing. "Ellie?" His voice brought me back to the present. "You looked like you were a million miles away." "Sorry, I was just thinking." I took the last sip of my wine, feeling bold and reckless and more alive than I'd felt in months. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." I leaned forward slightly, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Did you ever have a girlfriend in high school who hated red wine?" The question hung between us like a held breath. I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition, any flicker of memory. For a moment, his expression didn't change. Then, slowly, a frown creased his forehead. "That's a strange question," he said carefully. "Is it?" He set down his fork and really looked at me for the first time all evening. I could practically see the wheels turning in his mind, some part of him trying to place where he'd heard that voice before, why this conversation felt familiar. He started to speak, then stopped. His hand moved unconsciously to the scar above his eyebrow, a gesture I remembered from when he was nervous or confused. "There was someone, a long time ago, but that's impossible. You can't be." "Can't be what?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it across the table. "Eleanor Martin," he said slowly, like he was testing the words. "But that was God, that was almost 50 years ago. She'd be 64 next month, I finished for him, though I go by Eleanor Catterson now, have for 45 years. The color drained from his face. Ellie? The way he said my name, my real name, made something inside me break open. All the careful composure I'd maintained throughout dinner crumbled, and suddenly I was 17 again, watching the boy I loved look at me like I was a stranger. "Hello, David," I said quietly. He stared at me for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. I could see him trying to reconcile the girl he'd known with the woman sitting across from him, trying to find traces of my 17-year-old face in the 64-year-old version. "My God," he whispered. "Ellie, it's really you." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Now that the secret was out, I didn't know what to do with it. We sat in silence while the restaurant hummed around us, other couples laughing and talking and living their normal, uncomplicated lives, while we dealt with the impossible coincidence of finding each other again. "This is—" He ran his hand through his silver hair, a gesture I remembered from when he was overwhelmed. "How is this possible? Helen is your daughter?" Helen Patterson. She married young, kept her husband's name even after the divorce. I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. What are the odds? Astronomatical. He was still staring at me like I might disappear if he looked away. You look wonderful, Ellie. Different, but wonderful. I can see it now, in your eyes. How did I not recognize you immediately?" It was a good question. Maybe it was because he'd been expecting Eleanor, not Ellie. Maybe it was because 47 years had changed us both in ways we couldn't have imagined when we were young and thought we knew everything about everything. Or maybe it was because some part of him, like some part of me, had built walls around those memories to keep them from hurting too much. "People change," I said, echoing my earlier words. "We're not the same people we were then." "Aren't we?" His voice was softer now, uncertain. "I mean, obviously we're older, we've lived different lives, but sitting here with you, God, Ellie, it feels like no time has passed at all." I knew what he meant. Despite everything, the gray hair and wrinkles, the decades apart, the lives we'd built with other people, there was something fundamentally unchanged about being near him. The way he held his head when he listened, the way he considered his words before speaking. The way he looked at me like I was the most important person in the room. "Your daughter," I said, trying to process the implications. "Sarah, she set this up?" She insisted I try online dating, created my profile for me, said I was hopeless at describing myself. He shook his head, looking bewildered. "But she couldn't have known. There's no way she could have known about you." Unless there was a way. Unless I'd said more than I remembered during those wine-soaked evenings with Helen. Unless my daughter, in her well-meaning attempts to help me move forward, had done some digging into my past. Unless this wasn't a coincidence at all, but an elaborate setup orchestrated by two daughters who thought they knew what their parents needed. "Helen has always been resourceful," I said carefully, "and she's been worried about me since Tom died. She keeps saying I need to get out more, meet people, start living again." "Tom," he repeated, "your husband." For 43 years. He was a good man, David, a kind man. I felt the need to defend my marriage, even though David, Robert, had never questioned it. We were happy. "I'm glad," and he sounded like he meant it. "I always wondered, after I left, I wondered what happened to you, if you were okay, if you were happy. After I left." Such a simple way to describe the complete devastation of my 18-year-old heart. "You just disappeared," I said, and couldn't keep the old hurt from creeping into my voice. One day you were there, and the next you were gone. No phone call, no letter, nothing. His face crumpled. Ellie, It doesn't matter now, I said quickly, though we both knew that wasn't true. It was a long time ago. We were kids. It does matter. His voice was firm. It matters because I was an idiot. It matters because I hurt you, and I've regretted it every day since. The restaurant had gotten quieter around us. The dinner crowd was thinning, and I realized we'd been sitting there for over 2 hours. Our waitress approached tentatively, probably wanting to turn the table, but too polite to rush us. "Can I get you folks anything else? Coffee? Dessert?" David, I was still having trouble thinking of him as Robert, looked at me questioningly. "What do you say? Are you ready to leave, or?" I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to go back to my empty house and my television programs and pretend this evening had never happened. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to him again, not when I just found him after almost 50 years. "Coffee would be nice," I said. We ordered coffee and chocolate cake to share because sharing dessert felt like something the people we used to be would have done. The cake was rich and decadent, and when he pushed it toward me so I could have the first bite, his fingers brushed mine, just like they had 1,000 times when we were young. "Tell me about your life," I said, settling back in my chair. The real version, not the first date version. He laughed, but there was sadness in it. "The real version? It's been good, mostly. I loved my wife. I need you to know that. Margaret was everything I needed, everything I deserved after the mess I made of things with you. We built a life together, raised 3 kids who turned out better than we had any right to expect. But there was always something missing, some part of me that I left behind when I was 18 and too stupid to know what I was throwing away." His honesty was devastating. "David, let me finish, please." He took a sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. "I joined the Army 2 weeks after graduation, signed up without telling anyone, not even my parents. I was so sure I knew what I wanted, so convinced that I needed to see the world, be a man, all that bullshit young men tell themselves when they're scared of real intimacy. The Army, I'd never known that. In all my imaginings of what had happened to him, I'd never pictured him in uniform, fighting in some distant war while I cried myself to sleep in my childhood bedroom. Vietnam? I asked quietly. 2 tours. Came back different, like most of us did. Took me years to figure out how to be a person again, how to let someone love me." He looked down at his hands. "By the time I was ready to come back, to try to find you, you were married, had children. I saw the announcement in the paper. Eleanor Martin Patterson, married to Thomas Patterson of Cedar Grove." I figured you'd moved on, built a life without me, and maybe that was for the best. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I waited for you," I said softly, "all that summer, all through senior year. I kept thinking you'd call or write or just show up at my door with some explanation. I kept thinking that I'd come back for you." Yes. The word hung between us, heavy with decades of what if and might have been. I thought about the girl I'd been, how I'd turned down dates because I was convinced David would return, how I'd almost not gone to college because I was afraid he'd come back and not be able to find me, how I'd finally, slowly, let Tom into my heart because he was patient and kind and didn't seem to mind that I came with ghosts. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words carried the weight of 47 years. "I'm sorry I was too young and too scared to know what I had. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I missed your wedding and your children growing up and all the birthdays and anniversaries and ordinary days we might have shared." The apology I'd waited half a lifetime to hear, and now I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to tell him it was okay, that I'd forgiven him long ago. Part of me wanted to yell at him for all the nights I'd cried, all the times I'd wondered what was wrong with me that he could disappear so completely. But mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of carrying the hurt, tired of wondering, tired of pretending it didn't matter. "Thank you," I said finally, "for saying that, for explaining. Does it help, knowing why?" I considered the question while I took another bite of cake. Did it help? In some ways, yes. The mystery was solved, the question answered. He hadn't left because he'd stopped loving me, or because he'd found someone else, or because of some failing on my part. He'd left because he was 18 and scared and making the kind of decisions 18-year-olds make when they think they have forever to fix their mistakes. "It helps," I said, "but it also makes me sad, for both of us, for all the time we lost." "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly. "I mean, I know you said you and Tom were happy, and I'm glad for that. But are you happy now, with your life as it is?" It was such a complicated question. Was I happy? I had been for most of my adult life. I'd loved teaching, loved watching children discover the world through books and experiments and art projects. I'd loved being a mother, even through the sleepless nights and teenage rebellion and worry that never really ended. I'd loved Tom, differently than I'd loved David, but deeply and truly. But now I was lonely in a way that surprised me with its intensity. I missed having someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone who knew my stories and my preferences and the way I took my coffee. I missed being part of a pair, missed the easy intimacy of a long marriage, missed being someone's person. "I'm lonely," I admitted. More than I expected to be. Tom and we did everything together for so long that I don't quite know how to be just Eleanor, just me. "Ellie," he said gently, "you're Ellie to me. You'll always be Ellie." The name felt strange and familiar at the same time, like putting on a sweater I'd forgotten I owned. I'd been Eleanor for so long, responsible Eleanor, sensible Eleanor, Eleanor who had her life figured out. But Ellie had been someone different. Ellie had been young and hopeful and willing to take risks. Maybe it was time to remember what that felt like. "What happens now?" I asked. The question scared me as soon as it left my mouth, but I needed to know. Were we just going to exchange phone numbers and promise to stay in touch? Were we going to pretend this was a normal first date and see where it led? Or were we going to acknowledge that this was impossible, too complicated, too loaded with history to ever work? He reached across the table and took my hand. His skin was warm and slightly rough, marked by age and work and a lifetime of experiences I knew nothing about. But his touch still sent electricity up my arm, still made my heart skip the way it had when I was 17 and thought I knew everything about love. "I don't know," he said honestly. "This is uncharted territory for me. I never expected to see you again, never imagined we'd have this chance to, start over? Pick up where we left off? I don't even know if that's possible." "It's not," I said, and watched something flicker across his face that might have been disappointment. "We can't pick up where we left off because we're not the same people. We can't start over because we have too much history. But maybe we can start something new, something that acknowledges who we were but focuses on who we are now." He squeezed my hand. "I'd like that, if you're willing to try." I looked around the restaurant, at the empty tables and the staff who were clearly ready for us to leave, at the life I'd built that suddenly felt too small to contain the possibilities that were opening up before me. "I'm willing," I said, and meant it. We paid the check and walked out into the cool night air together. The parking lot was nearly empty now, and our cars were parked on opposite sides under different streetlights. For a moment, we stood there awkwardly, like teenagers at the end of a first date, unsure how to say goodbye. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "I mean, I know this is complicated, and our kids are going to have questions, and there's a lot we need to figure out, but—" "Yes," I said before he could finish the sentence. "Yes, I'd like that very much." He smiled, and for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been overlaid on the man he'd become like a double exposure photograph. "Tomorrow's too soon, isn't it?" I laughed. "Probably, but maybe not too soon for a phone call? I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, our fingers fumbling with phones that were far more complicated than anything we'd imagined when we were young. Then we stood there for another moment, neither of us wanting to be the first to leave. "Ellie?" he said finally. "Yes?" "Thank you. For tonight, for being willing to try, for still being you underneath everything else." Before I could respond, he leaned forward and kissed my cheek, soft and gentle and full of promise. Then he was walking to his car, and I was walking to mine, and we were driving away in different directions like we had so many times before. But this time felt different. This time felt like a beginning instead of an ending. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying every moment of the evening, every word we'd exchanged, every look that had passed between us. When I finally did drift off, I dreamed of being 17 again, of summer afternoons that stretched endlessly ahead of us, of promises we'd been too young to keep. I woke up to my phone ringing. For a confused moment, I thought it might be David, Robert, calling to tell me the whole evening had been a mistake. But it was Helen's name on the screen, and I realized she'd probably been waiting to hear from me since last night. "Mom, how did it go? You never called." I sat up in bed, trying to figure out how to even begin explaining what had happened. It went well, very well. "Really? You sound strange." "Are you okay?" Strange didn't begin to cover how I felt. "Helen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." There was a pause. "Okay, that sounds ominous. When you set up this date, did you know who Robert Matthews was?" Another pause, longer this time. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did you know he was David Morrison?" Silence. Then, "Oh my God, Mom, how did you—" "I mean, I thought maybe, but I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to get your hopes up if I was wrong." So she had known, or at least suspected. How? "Do you remember last Christmas when we were going through Dad's things and found that box of your high school stuff? You had a few glasses of wine and started telling me about your first love, the boy who broke your heart, David Morrison. You said his name like it still hurt to say it." I did remember that night, though hazily. We'd been trying to decide what to keep and what to donate, and I'd found my old yearbook. Had I really said that much about David? Had I been that transparent in my pain? "I started thinking about it," Helen continued, "about how sad you seemed when you talked about him. And then, when I was setting up the dating profile for you, I did some research. Robert David Matthews, age 70, widowed, 3 children, including a daughter named Sarah. It took some digging, but I found his high school records. David Robert Morrison. He'd changed his name after his military service." Helen. I know it seems manipulative, and maybe it was, but Mom, you've been so lonely since Dad died, and when you talked about David that night, there was something in your voice. I thought maybe if he was available, if he was single, maybe you two could at least have closure. I never imagined it would actually work out like this. I wasn't sure whether to be angry or grateful. My daughter had manipulated both of us, had orchestrated this reunion without our knowledge or consent. But she'd also given us something I never thought we'd have, a second chance. "Are you mad?" Helen's voice was small, uncertain. I thought about it. Was I mad? Part of me felt manipulated, like a puppet in my daughter's well-intentioned scheme. But a larger part of me felt grateful beyond words. Without Helen's interference, I never would have seen David again. I would have spent the rest of my life wondering what happened to him, carrying that old hurt like a stone in my chest. "No," I said finally. "I'm not mad. Surprised, maybe. A little overwhelmed. But not mad. Really? Because I know it was presumptuous of me, and if it had gone badly. But it didn't go badly. It was wonderful, Helen. Complicated and strange and wonderful." I could hear the relief in her voice. "So, you're going to see him again?" "I think so. Yes." The certainty in my own voice surprised me. "We're going to try to figure out what this is, what it could be. I'm so happy, Mom. You deserve this." You deserve to be happy again. After we hung up, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the garden Tom had helped me plant 15 years ago. The roses were past their peak now, but still beautiful in their autumn decline. Everything had its season, I supposed. Maybe this was mine. Not a second spring, but a different kind of blooming altogether. My phone buzzed with a text message. David. I still couldn't think of him as Robert. "Good morning, Ellie. I hope you slept better than I did. Would you like to have lunch today? I know it's soon, but I can't stop thinking about last night." I stared at the message for a long moment, my finger hovering over the keyboard. This was my chance to be sensible, to take things slowly, to protect my heart the way I'd learned to do over the years. But I'd been sensible for so long. Maybe it was time to be Ellie again, just for a while. "I slept terribly too," I typed back. "And yes, I'd love to have lunch." We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place that served soup and sandwiches and didn't mind if you lingered over coffee for hours. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He'd remembered how I liked it: cream, no sugar. Some things, apparently, never changed. "You look beautiful," he said as I sat down, and I felt myself blush like a schoolgirl. "It's daylight, David. You can see all my wrinkles now." "I can see your face," he corrected gently. "The same face I fell in love with when we were 17, just with more stories written on it." We talked more easily today, without the weight of pretense between us. He told me about his children, his grandchildren, his life with Margaret. I told him about Tom, about the years of teaching, about Helen and Michael and the grandchildren I adored from a distance. We were filling in the gaps, creating a map of the decades we'd spent apart. "Can I ask you something?" I said during a lull in the conversation. "Do you ever wonder how different things would have been if you hadn't left?" He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "Every day for the first 20 years, less often after that, but it never completely went away. Do you?" "Sometimes, especially after Tom died, when I was going through all our old things. I found some letters you wrote me from before you left. I'd kept them all those years without really knowing why." "What did they say? I don't remember." "Silly things mostly. Plans for college, dreams about the future. In one of them, you drew a little cartoon of us as old people sitting on a porch swing together." I smiled at the memory. "You gave me wrinkles and a cane, and yourself a bald head and a beard." He laughed. "Sounds about right, though I managed to keep most of my hair." "The beard suits you." We ordered lunch, soup and half a sandwich each, and continued talking. About books we'd read, movies we'd seen, places we'd traveled. About the children we'd raised and the grandchildren who were growing up too fast. About the friends we'd lost and the ones who'd stuck around. About getting older and what that meant for the time we had left. "I keep thinking this is too good to be true," he said suddenly, "that I'm going to wake up and discover this was all some elaborate dream." I knew exactly what he meant. The whole situation felt surreal, like we'd stepped outside the normal rules of time and space. If it is a dream, let's not wake up yet. After lunch, we walked through the downtown area, past shops and cafes and the small park where the town held its summer concerts. It was a beautiful October day, the kind where the air was crisp but the sun was warm, and the trees were showing off their autumn colors like they knew winter was coming. "This is nice," I said, meaning more than just the weather. "It is." He took my hand as we walked, and I marveled at how natural it felt. "Ellie, can I ask you something? And feel free to tell me it's none of my business." "Okay. Are you ready for this? For whatever this is turning into? Because I don't want to push you into something you're not prepared for." I thought about his question as we sat down on a bench facing the duck pond. Was I ready? I'd been married to Tom for 43 years. I'd defined myself as his wife for so long that I wasn't sure who I was without that identity. And here was David, asking me to figure out who we could be together at an age when most people thought their romantic lives were behind them. "I don't know if anyone's ever ready for something like this," I said finally. "But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of playing it safe." Tom used to say that regret was just another word for not taking chances when they presented themselves. Smart man. He was. And he would have liked you, I think. He would have wanted me to be happy. I hope so. Because, Ellie, I need you to know, this isn't just nostalgia for me. This isn't just about recapturing something from our youth. I'm falling for you all over again, for the woman you are now, not just the girl you were then. His words hit me square in the chest. "David, I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but I'm 70 years old, and I don't have time to waste pretending I don't feel what I feel." I turned to face him fully. "What do you feel?" "Like I've been holding my breath for 47 years and can finally exhale. Like I've been looking for something I lost and just found it again. Like maybe it's not too late for us after all." The honesty in his voice undid me completely. Before I could stop myself, I was crying. Not the polite tears of a woman trying to maintain her dignity, but the messy, overwhelming sobs of someone whose carefully constructed walls had just come tumbling down. He pulled me against his chest, and I let him, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with something that was just distinctly him. His sweater was soft against my cheek, and his hand was warm and steady on my back. "I'm sorry," I managed between sobs. "I don't know why I'm crying." "Because it's overwhelming," he said simply. "Because we're 70 and 17 at the same time. Because we thought we'd missed our chance, and it turns out maybe we haven't." When I finally stopped crying, I pulled back to look at him. What are people going to think? Our children? Our friends? The neighbors? "That we're lucky," he said firmly, "that we found each other again against impossible odds, that love doesn't have an expiration date. The kids are going to have questions. Helen engineered this, but your Sarah didn't know, did she?" "No, but she's going to be thrilled. She's been worried about me, said I was turning into a hermit. She'll probably want to plan our wedding before our second date." "Wedding?" The word came out as a squeak. He grinned. "Too soon?" "Way too soon." But I felt myself smiling despite my tears. "But not impossible. Someday, maybe. Someday maybe is good enough for me." We spent the rest of the afternoon walking around town, holding hands like teenagers and not caring who saw us. We bought coffee and sat on another bench. We browsed through the bookstore. We fed ducks at the pond. Simple things, ordinary things that felt extraordinary because we were doing them together. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, we made our way back to our cars. Again, neither of us wanted to be the first to leave. "Dinner tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes, but let me cook for you this time." Come to my house. I'll make that pasta dish you used to love. If you still like it. You remember what I used to like? I remember everything, David. That's been my problem for 47 years. He kissed me then, properly this time, not just a peck on the cheek, but a real kiss that made me remember what it felt like to be wanted, to be cherished, to be someone's everything. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Tomorrow can't come fast enough, he murmured against my forehead. Tomorrow, I agreed. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling from his kiss. At 64, I was falling in love again. It should have been impossible. It should have been ridiculous. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I had a man coming to dinner. Not just any man, but David Morrison, the boy who'd been my first love and was somehow, miraculously, becoming my second chance. I spent the day preparing like I was hosting a dinner party for the president. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, bought fresh flowers for the table, and went to 3 different stores to find the ingredients for the pasta dish he'd loved when we were teenagers. I even bought a bottle of red wine, a good one, not the cheap stuff I usually kept for cooking. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, I'd changed clothes 3 times and was second-guessing everything from the menu to the tablecloth. When the doorbell rang, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. "Hi," I said when I opened the door, suddenly shy again. "Hi yourself." He was holding a bouquet of yellow roses, my favorite, though I wasn't sure if he remembered that or if it was just a lucky guess. "You look beautiful." I was wearing a simple blue dress that Helen had helped me pick out for church functions. Nothing fancy, but the way he looked at me made me feel like I was wearing a ball gown. "Come in," I said, stepping back to let him pass. "Welcome to my home." He looked around with interest, taking in the family photos on the mantel, the books that filled every available shelf, the comfortable furniture that Tom and I had chosen together over the years. I wondered what he saw when he looked at the life I'd built without him. "It's lovely," he said finally. "It feels like you, warm and welcoming and full of stories." 43 years worth of stories. I'd like to hear them sometime, if you're willing to share. I led him to the kitchen where the pasta was simmering and the garlic bread was warming in the oven. He perched on one of the stools at the island, watching me move around the familiar space with the ease of decades of practice. "It smells incredible," he said, "just like I remember." I wasn't sure if your tastes had changed. Some things have, but not the important things. We ate in the dining room, at the table where Tom and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd helped the children with homework and hosted holiday dinners and celebrated anniversaries. It should have felt strange having David there, but instead it felt right, like he belonged in that chair across from me. "Tell me about your work," I said. "What kind of engineering?" "Civil, bridges, mostly. I've designed spans all over the country. There's something satisfying about building something that will outlast you, something that helps people get where they need to go." "Like teaching," I said, "helping people get where they need to go, just in a different way." "Exactly," he smiled, "though I imagine your work was more rewarding. I built structures, you built minds." After dinner, we moved to the living room with our wine. I put on some music, jazz, soft and mellow, and we settled on the couch with a comfortable distance between us. Not too close, not too far. "Can I see some pictures?" he asked, nodding toward the photo albums on the coffee table. "Of your life, your family?" I hesitated for a moment. Looking at pictures of my life with Tom while sitting next to David felt like mixing 2 worlds that shouldn't intersect. But then I realized that's exactly what I was doing, not replacing one life with another, but finding a way to honor both. I pulled out one of the albums and opened it between us. "This is our wedding day," I said, pointing to a picture of Tom and me cutting our cake. I was 21 and radiant, he was 23 and nervous, and we had no idea what lay ahead of us. "You look happy," David said, and there was no jealousy in his voice, just genuine warmth. We were. I turned the page. This is Helen as a baby, and this is Michael when he was 2. We went through years of photos, birthdays and Christmases, family vacations and school plays, graduations and first days of school. A whole life documented in snapshots, a marriage that had lasted long enough to see children grow up and have children of their own. "You built something beautiful," David said when we reached the end of the album. "A beautiful family, a beautiful life." "What about you? Do you have pictures?" He pulled out his phone and showed me photos of his children and grandchildren. Sarah, who looked just like him, his son Mark, who was a teacher like I'd been, his youngest daughter Lisa, who'd inherited his engineering mind and was building bridges of her own. Grandchildren who called him Grandpa Bob and climbed all over him during family visits. "They're wonderful," I said, and meant it. This was part of who he was now, not just the boy I'd loved, but a man who'd raised children and been a grandfather and built a legacy of his own. "Ellie," he said after we'd put the phone away, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My heart started beating faster. "Okay. Are you doing this? Seeing me? Letting me into your life? Are you doing it because you love me or because you're lonely?" The question was so direct, so painfully honest, that it took my breath away. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see past the familiar features to the heart of what he was asking. "Both," I said finally. "I am lonely, David. I've been lonely since Tom died, lonely in a way I didn't know was possible. But that's not why I'm here with you. I'm here because yesterday, when you smiled at me in that restaurant, I felt something I thought was gone forever. I'm here because when you kiss me, I remember what it feels like to be completely, utterly myself with another person." He reached for my hand. "And what does that feel like?" "Like coming home." The words hung between us, simple and true and terrifying in their implications. Coming home to a person I'd known for less than a week, who was simultaneously a stranger and the most familiar person in the world. "I feel the same way," he said quietly, "like I've been wandering for 47 years and just found my way back." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the music and the quiet sounds of the house settling around us. Outside, a neighbor was walking their dog, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the sound of teenagers laughing as they walked down the street. Normal life continuing while mine turned upside down in the most wonderful way. "I should probably go," he said eventually, though neither of us moved to get up. "Probably," I agreed. "It's getting late. And we're being sensible, taking things slowly. Very sensible. So why don't I want to leave?" I turned to face him fully. "Because you're 70 years old and tired of being sensible?" He laughed, something like that. "David," I said, my heart pounding with what I was about to suggest, "what if you didn't leave? What if you stayed?" His eyes widened. "Ellie, I'm not talking about anything. I just mean, what if you stayed and we talked all night? What if we fell asleep on this couch like we used to fall asleep watching movies at the drive-in? What if we stopped being sensible for one night and just were?" He studied my face, looking for doubt or uncertainty. "Are you sure?" "I haven't been sure about anything in 3 years, but I'm sure about this. I'm sure about you." So he stayed. We moved the photo albums and curled up on opposite ends of the couch, facing each other with our feet almost touching in the middle. We talked about everything and nothing. Memories from high school, dreams we'd given up and dreams we still harbored, fears about getting older, hopes for whatever time we had left. Somewhere around midnight, we both started to drift off. He was in the middle of telling me about a bridge he'd designed in Oregon when his voice started to slow, his words becoming softer and further apart. I watched his face relax into sleep, saw the lines around his eyes soften, and felt a fierce protectiveness wash over me. This man had been a part of me for so long, carried in my memory like a song I couldn't quite forget. And now he was here, real and solid and breathing softly on my couch, and I was falling asleep to the sound of it like I had when we were young and thought we had all the time in the world. I woke up to sunlight streaming through the living room windows and the sound of someone moving quietly in my kitchen. For a confused moment, I thought it was Tom, up early to make coffee like he had every morning for 43 years. Then I remembered, and my heart did a little skip of joy. David appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee, looking rumpled and slightly embarrassed. "I hope you don't mind." I found the coffee and thought, "I don't mind." I sat up, trying to smooth my hair and wishing I'd at least brushed my teeth before he saw me in the morning light. "What time is it?" 7:30. "I've been awake for about an hour, just watching you sleep." I hope that's not creepy. It should have been creepy. Instead, it felt like the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. Not creepy, sweet. He handed me a mug and sat down beside me, closer than we'd been sitting the night before. "How do you feel about what happened? About me staying?" I took a sip of coffee. Perfect, just the way I liked it, and considered the question. How did I feel? Nervous, definitely. Excited, a little scared. But underneath all of that, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hopeful. "Good," I said simply. "I feel good about it." "Me too," he smiled, and I saw again that overlap of boy and man, past and present. Though I should probably go home and shower and change clothes before someone sees me and starts rumors about the scandalous widow Patterson. "Let them talk," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I'm 64 years old. If I want to have a sleepover with a handsome man, that's my business." "A sleepover," he repeated, grinning. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Among other things." We finished our coffee, and he gathered his jacket and keys, but we were both reluctant to end the bubble of intimacy we'd created. At the front door, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me thoroughly, and I thought about how strange it was that something so familiar could feel so new. "Dinner again tonight?" he asked against my lips. "Your turn to cook," I said. "I want to see your place." "It's not much. Bachelor pad central." "But I'd love to have you over." After he left, I wandered through my house, seeing it through new eyes. The photos on the mantle, the books I'd read and reread, the comfortable furniture that had shaped itself to my body over the years. This was my life, the one I'd built carefully and loving with Tom. But maybe there was room in it for something new. Maybe there was room for David. I called Helen while I was getting dressed, needing to hear my daughter's voice, needing some anchor to the world I'd known before David walked back into it. "Mom, you're up early." "I've been up for a while. Helen, I need to tell you something." "Okay, you sound serious." "I think I'm falling in love again." Silence. Then, "With Robert? I mean, David?" "Yes, I know it's fast. I know it seems crazy. But Helen, I haven't felt this alive in years." "Oh, Mom." I could hear tears in her voice. "I'm so happy for you. You deserve this. You deserve to feel this way again." "Do I? Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying your father's memory." "Dad's been gone for 3 years, Mom. He wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone. He'd want you to be happy." She was right, of course. Tom had always been generous, always put my happiness before his own comfort. He would have wanted this for me, would have wanted me to find love again if the opportunity presented itself. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I'm scared of getting hurt again. I'm scared of being too old for this. I'm scared that I'm making a fool of myself. You're not making a fool of yourself. You're being brave. And Mom, even if you do get hurt, isn't it better to take the chance than to spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been? After we hung up, I spent the day in a strange state of suspended animation. I did normal things, grocery shopping, laundry, paying bills, but everything felt different, charged with possibility. I was going to David's house for dinner. I was going to see how he lived, what his life looked like without me in it. I was going to take another step forward into whatever this was becoming. David's house was a modest ranch in a neighborhood similar to mine, the kind of place where retired couples tended their gardens and walked their dogs and knew each other's names. He must have been watching for me because he opened the door before I could even knock. "Welcome," he said, taking my coat. "Fair warning, this place hasn't had a woman's touch in 4 years. It's clean, but it's definitely a man's house." He wasn't wrong. The furniture was comfortable but utilitarian, the walls mostly bare, except for a few framed photos and some certificates from his engineering work. But it was tidy and warm, and it smelled like him, that combination of aftershave and coffee and something indefinably masculine that made me want to breathe deeper. "It's perfect," I said, and meant it. This was who he was when no one was watching. Practical, unpretentious, focused on function over form. I like it. "Really? Because I was thinking of asking you to help me redecorate, if you're interested, if this thing between us." The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made me smile. This thing between us? I'm trying not to scare you off by calling it what it is. And what is it? He stopped pretending to fuss with dinner preparations and looked at me directly. "Love, Ellie. It's love. I'm in love with you again. Or maybe I never stopped being in love with you. But either way, that's what this is." The words hit me like a physical force. I'd known it, of course, had felt it growing between us like a plant reaching towards sunlight. But hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "I love you too," I said, and watched his entire face transform. "I've loved you for 47 years, even when I was married to someone else, even when I thought I'd never see you again. And I love who you are now, who you've become." He crossed the kitchen in 3 quick steps and pulled me into his arms, kissing me with a passion that made my knees weak. We were both crying and laughing at the same time, overwhelmed by the impossibility and the absolute rightness of it all.